In this video, we will show you how to replace your coolant reservoir on this Lincoln Navigator. This will be located in your engine compartment on the driver's side front. Let's get into it. Okay friends, to start replacing our coolant reservoir, what I want you to pay attention to is this area right along the bottom. You can see that there's a rubber hose that goes to it. Inside of the reservoir, there should be coolant all the way up to the maximum line here. Of course, you will have to drain coolant out of it all the way down to where that lower hose is located. Now for this, you can either drain the coolant at the radiator, down at the petcock or the drain, or you can just use some sort of suction device and remove the coolant from inside the reservoir itself. Either way, you don't have to remove all the coolant from in the system unless, of course, you're planning on doing a flush. First, make sure that the cooling system is cool to the touch. Come right over here to the reservoir and turn that cap counterclockwise, lifting it up and away from your face. Give it a quick inspection. And then typically I just rest this right back on here, leaving it loose. Now let's make our way underneath the passenger side front of the vehicle. You can easily access the lower drain on the radiator from just inside of the passenger side wheel well. Now for this, you want to make sure you have hand and eye protection at all times, of course. You'll notice along the passenger side, you have the drain port. To divert the coolant into our coolant receptacle, I'm going to put a little hose on here. Continue on with a 19mm wrench to loosen this nut. Allow the coolant to drain. Once that's done draining, go ahead and close that coolant drain. Now let's just make sure that the coolant drain is nice and tight. Now let's make our way up along here. We're going to remove the jack handle. For this, you'll find it's held in place with a couple of clips. Go ahead and give it a little tug. Set that aside. With that out of the way, let's continue on to removing our plastic trim panel that makes its way all the way from one side of the vehicle to the other. You'll find holding this down, you have several push clips. We'll start from this side right here. On these clips right here, there should be a little center tab that you can generally pry up out of there with a flathead screwdriver or use a Phillips head to loosen it up. As you can tell, once you have the center dislodged, it becomes unlocked, and then you can remove it. We'll do the same down the line. Once those are out of there, we'll continue on a little bit further towards the engine. You'll find two more. Remove your trim panel. Now that we have that out of the way, let's continue on to the hose that connects to the top of the radiator. Squeeze the clamp, slide it up, remove the hose from the radiator. Set that aside. Let's move along to removing our air filter housing. For this, you'll find that you have an 8mm headed clamp. You can also use a flathead screwdriver for this. Loosen the clamp just enough that you can remove the hose. Once you have that off of there, we'll continue on to the clamp that holds the two air filter housing pieces together. Separate this. On the bottom of this area, there will be some wiring that leads to your mass airflow sensor. Be careful not to damage it, but we do need to get this out of the way. We'll leave that in place and set this aside. Now you can grab onto this area. We're going to remove the air filter, and then we'll remove the housing from the body of the vehicle. For this, you'll find that you have two tabs that go down into rubber bushings. Let's go ahead and grab onto this and give it a little tug to separate it. With that separated, you can pull this away from the body of the vehicle. Set this aside. Now we can start dismounting the reservoir from the body of the vehicle. For this, you'll find that you have two 8mm headed bolts. Remove the pair. Follow that coolant reservoir all the way down to the lower hose. Squeeze the clamp, slide the clamp down the hose, remove the hose from the reservoir. Now that we have that hose off of there, we can give this a little wiggle, start lifting it up from along the inner area here, and then also twisting it and removing it from the fender area along the outside. There it is, friends. All right, let's get ready for the installation of our brand new coolant reservoir. We're going to have a look down along the bottom here. You'll find that you have this tab that protrudes out with a slot in the center. Looking at the body of the vehicle, you can see that there's a notch cut out for that. We're going to have to get this aligned and slide it down into place. Let's get that tab lined up with the body over there. Slide it down into position, align both of your mounting bolt holes, start them in, snug them up. Make sure it's secure. Now we can start reconnecting our hoses. Let's start with the lowest one. Slide that up as far as you can onto the reservoir, reinstall the clamp. Let's grab onto that hose, make sure it's completely secured, continue on to your upper hose. Make sure that's secured as well. All right, let's start putting back in our air filter housing. You'll find on the bottom of this, you have those two little tabs that protrude out and the rubber grommets for them to line up with. We'll get this into position, align those tabs with their rubber grommets, and press it down into position. Give it a wiggle to make sure it's secured. Install your air filter. As we slide this into place, make sure that you have the mass airflow sensor wiring facing down. Before we tighten this clamp, let's continue putting the two areas of the air filter housing together. You can twist this as needed. Align the top area along here. You can tell that you have a tab on one side and a little carved out area on the other. Once you have those aligned, you should be able to squeeze them together and put the clamp into the locked position. Now we can continue on to our clamp. Make sure that's completely secured together. We'll move along to our air temp sensor. Press that in, listen for a click, give it a tug to make sure that's secure. Move along to your breather hose. We'll slide that into position. As always, double check it as well. Reinstall your front trim panel and install all of your push clips. For each of the push clips, you want to make sure that you press in the outer portion first, and then continue on by locking it in position with the center. Do the same to all. Now that we have the trim panel on there, let's continue on to our jack handle. We'll slide this into position. There we are. All right, now it's time to fill our cooling system. Go ahead and remove that cover. Now, if you were to look along the passenger side of the coolant reservoir, you're going to be able to find an area where it tells you cold maximum. Has a line coming across here. We're going to go ahead and fill up the cooling system up to that line. After that, we can start up the vehicle and let it run for a little while, making sure that we burp out any air from in the system. To do this, you can either use a funnel up along the top and put some in there, or you can use a coolant filling device. There we are. Once you've filled the coolant up to the cold maximum line, continue on by starting up the vehicle and let it run for a little while. What you'll find is if you are looking down in this area, typically you're going to have a couple air bubbles making their way up and out of the system, and the coolant level will make its way down. Continue adding until you're at the top of the coolant maximum line. Once you're sure you have plenty of heat coming out of the vents, go ahead and close up that cap.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.